Oh, we are now recording. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. As some of you may know or not know, Skydive Vancouver Island, we have ran a virtual safety seminar series that kicked off a couple weeks ago. And tonight we are super excited to introduce Nicholas Helfrich. He is a CSPA Coach 3. And I do apologize because I had to come to my office where we have the Starlink better Wi-Fi, and I forgot my bio for Nicholas. I'm so sorry, Nicholas. Anyways, Nicholas is a totally experienced canopy pilot. He rocks the skills. He's an amazing coach. Originating out of South Africa, he now actually resides in Ontario, where he works at a drop zone there, Skydive Toronto, with the Chow family. I also have here my husband, Gord. He's going to, yay, there's Gord. And together we own Skydive Vancouver Island. So a few housekeeping rules. The plan of the presentation today is Nicholas is going to present, and we've decided that we're going to save the discussion and conversation and questions till after he has done his presentation for a couple of reasons, and I'm sure Nicholas might elaborate on that. There is a couple things to be mindful of. At the end, there is a little button where you can have reactions, and in that reaction, you can put your hand up if you have a question. We'll be using that. I'll be helping to facilitate who's asking questions and going back and forth that way. You are all muted, obviously, during this conversation. There is also a chat option on the right-hand side of your computer where you can type in information there. Just so you know, I am not an experienced canopy pilot, especially advanced canopy piloting. So the questions won't be answered on there. However, they are going to be there for reference so that I'll watch them and we can hopefully bring them up at the end of the presentation. Without further delay, I welcome and thank Nicholas. The floor and stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Alison. I really appreciate for you and Gord to let us have this discussion and have me on board. I'm very happy to be here. I want to just kind of first say I'm not a Zoom person, so I'm very new at this and a bit wary. So please bear with me if I babble a little bit. At the end of the day, I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction of myself. I've been in the sport for about 19 years. For the last 16 years of that, I've been flying high performance parachutes. I've basically accumulated just under 8,000 odd skydives. In that 8,000 skydives, it's around about 5,500 of that has been done on sub 100 canopies. I am a full-time skydiver. When COVID lifts again, hopefully soon. I currently jump a wing loading of 2.9. I don't recommend it to everyone and anyone. And that is my, everyday canopy that I jump. I personally have taken the situation and my variables into account, and I feel safe with my skill and my safety to use that setup on an everyday basis. My biggest thing, talk to your tablet. Okay, thank you. I'm being a little bit ripped off here in the background. To talk about advanced canopy piloting, we need to kind of, I want to bring up the safety side, but it's to bring up the natural order of how we get to these kind of things. And by doing that, we need to kind of roll back in our personal selves of, how we get to doing advanced canopy piloting. How I don't want to sit here and give you rules and lectures and, tell you guys what to do, but I would rather like to educate. I'm more of the educating type of person than putting regulations into place. I believe that if you give people the opportunity to think about what they're doing, they can adapt to the changing conditions that they're in. I'm also on the side of DZOs. I understand the liabilities that DZs have by having us swoopers, jumping at the drop zones. Canopy piloting is a high risk sport. And for DZOs to let us do what we do, they take a really, really large risk by having us there, because DZs are businesses. They need to generate income by having tandems come to do jumps and students to come and actually learn how to skydive. And the first thing that most people do is they check on reviews to see what the drop zone is like and check up on safety records. And sad enough, us as Canopy pilots, we're not exactly, inducive to giving drop zones great safety records. So we have to find a good compromise between, us as Canopy pilots and drop zones to be able to coexist together. So that is my biggest thing here, is I work with drop zones to try and do this and play within their rules. And it's kind of difficult because with the history of canopy piloting, we have made it very difficult, and we've had our governing bodies trying to put more restrictions on us, and drop zones who are trying to save themselves by putting restrictions of not kicking us out, but making it that, you can only do 90s, you can't do big turns, and not saying it's not the right thing to do, but there are dangers and things that go with it. And plus, we just go somewhere else and we want to stay at our drop zones. I also feel that, as canopy pilots, we need to actually kind of put pause. And when we do our turns and we come in, we've got to kind of think about, that we are role models to the novices and students on the drop zone, because when they see us come in, they also want to possibly do it. So we need to push pause and think of how do we educate people coming up in the sport to be able to be good canopy pilots and give them the background to be able to do it properly. That saying is very, very easy. It's like bringing up a child right is better than trying to fix a broken adult. That's exactly what we want to try and do, is we want to try and give them the tools to be able to be good canopy pilots in the future. With that, I hate going into this, because when people do it to me, I really hate listening to seminars that bring up the darker side of what we do. And it's sad enough we have to, because canopy piloting has such a stigma behind it with incidences and fatalities. And to go into that kind of brings a bit of humbleness to what we're actually doing. And some of this is like, I've taken it more from the US, because I don't have a lot of the Canadian references, and I only actually got some of them today. So just kind of bear with me a little bit. I don't know if anybody's gone into the research of it. Before high performance parachutes actually became a thing in the US alone, they used to record about one fatality every other year relating to low turns and things like that. And most of those low turns that happened in that kind of thing was people trying to avoid obstacles. As soon as high performance parachutes, came on the scene and became mainstream, that jumped to 1/3 of all incidences and fatalities were relating to something to do with canopy piloting, which is a scary, scary figure that actually, should actually make us all think. And just on 2020, last year, 45.5% of all fatalities was due to some mismanagement of landing underneath a perfectly flyable main parachute. 36% of those incidences had something to do with intentional or unintentional low turns. And those figures are absolutely scary. The percentages are high. Yes, the fatalities are a lot lower. Last year, the US only recorded 11 fatalities. But out of those 11 fatalities, 5 of them had something to do with a low turn. And that's scary. And when you look at Canada, last year, we had 2 fatalities in Canada. And both of those fatalities were related to a high performance landing. So that kind of gives Canada 100% fatality rate on canopy piloting and high performance landings, which means that we need to kind of look at what we're doing and see where we've gone wrong and what we can now do to improve that and make the changes within ourselves to actually make our discipline safer. Now, canopy piloting is one of those disciplines where we don't have things like, being a tandem instructor or an instructor where we have manuals and guidelines and, little check boxes that we can check to say that we're being safe. We're doing a human thing, and as humans, we make mistakes. And that pilot error factor is a large one that we now need to kind of figure out where we're going wrong. And that's why I say we need to kind of go back and, you can talk all you want about your turn and things like that, but it's what leads up to that turn that actually counts, I feel. And I just want to take you guys through what I do in my personal self. And when I coach people at the drop zone or I mentor people, these are the things that I kind of hammer back into them to make sure that they're thinking. And you might not agree maybe with some of the things that I'm saying, but as long as you are asking questions about it and thinking about it and coming up with ideas, I think I've hit back on my point that, we are doing something right. Because as long as we are all asking questions and learning from each other, we are then doing something right. I want to kind of start it off with currency, and especially coming from now a country that is very seasonal, this is a very big thing. A lot of us don't get to go out of the country to go jump in winter, so we have very limited amount of time to do our jumps. So when I look at currency, and again, this is when I look at myself and people I train, is time in sport. Time in sport is a very, very big thing because, we live in an age of turbine aircraft where people can do 1,000 jumps in 3 years, where back in the past, it used to take you like 10 years to do that same amount of jumps. But your drop zone currency was huge because you were always on the drop zone. Now you have this new generation of people coming through that are just literally dumping down money and doing as much jumps as they can, which means in a specific discipline, they're fantastic flyers, but in the whole drop zone and all the things, they are lacking in some things. So time in sport, I feel, is a very large thing. Just even talking on the drop zone, spending time after hours, listening to discussions, listening to safety reviews, it's all big things. Jump numbers in the last 12 months. I mean, that's what we always look at when you sign for your ratings and your licenses. Everybody asks, how many jumps have you done in the last 12 months? And it is a big thing, but it's kind of skewed. I mean, I come from a country where we don't have off time. We jump 12 months a year, but we're only a weekend operation. So, when I was at home, I would do 350 jumps a season, and without our governing body, I was current with 350 jumps because we didn't have long periods of time of being off, from the season. Where like here in Canada, I mean, for myself, I do 700 odd skydives in a season, but I do that in 5 months. And then I spent the other 7 months off. So in myself, I look at it and I am uncurrent. And, getting back to when we can jump, I've got to now be super careful, even in myself, because I'm at high risk. I'm at a very small parachute, high wing loading, and I've been off for so long. So it's a lot of things to take into account when you're looking at currency. With currency, you've got to look at the factors that happen within winter, because a lot of people now, you pick up a little bit of weight, so you've got to look at that in yourself. You got to look at it in winter. Most people buy new gear. If you're asking yourself questions, is like, you buy new gear, are you downsizing when you buy new gear? To get current, are you going to get current at your home DZ, or are you going to go visit another DZ to be able to get current? It's a big question for your currency and how are you going to approach these aspects, even if you are super, super experienced. After your currency side, for myself, I look at things like, my preparation. So once I'm starting to get into jump, how am I going to prep myself? Because, regardless of how current I am, I know for myself, I'm a 40-year-old full-time skydiver, which means that, my reaction times aren't as good as a 25-year-old's. So I've got to give myself all the benefits I can and a good fighting chance to keep myself alive. So on my preparation, and it's a big thing for me, and like people that know me and have heard stories that I tell, the next point for me is a very touchy one, and I hammer it into people I mentor in a large way, is if I know that I'm going to be jumping the next morning, I don't drink. I will avoid it. So because I jump 6 days a week, I know for those 6 days, I don't touch alcohol, I don't party, I don't drink. And the main thing is I can't afford to have a hangover. And to divert a little bit, and it's a little bit of a story, and I hope you guys can bear with me on it. But you know, a jumper from my home, DZ, that was like very much of a mentor for all of us. He was highly experienced, highly equipped with the right amount of knowledge. But he got to the drop zone for the weekend and they landed up having a big party. And the weather was bad. So no one thought that they were going to jump the whole weekend. But the Sunday morning, when they all woke up and kind of stumbled their way outside to go check the weather, all of a sudden the skies opened up and they were going to go jump. And he was an AFF instructor that went up with a student, and he shouldn't have done it, but he did it anyway. And when he came in for landing, he wasn't exactly at his best, and he lost his riser on landing. Now, instead of being aware enough to go straight to toggles and to stab out, he went back for his risers. And sad enough, he connected the ground and died on that field. And that kind of hit me hard for the fact that it's somebody that was highly experienced, that knew what he was doing, but because he was impaired in a way, his reactions weren't there. And that's why I kind of live my thing, and I teach people that literally, if this is what you want to do and fly small canopies, there are going to be sacrifices you're going to have to make. Because when you fly these canopies at the speeds that we fly, you have to be 100% at any given time. And looking after yourself, living a healthy lifestyle is paramount. I mean, the amount of knocks that we take as canopy pilots is huge. I used to always joke with people saying that, you know, if you leave the drop zone and you're not bleeding, it means you haven't been swooping hard enough. So you do take bumps, and you've got to be able to bounce back from those bumps. You know, good exercise, you know, good eating habits, good amount of sleep. And sleep is one of those things that I have found very difficult since moving to Canada, because, you know, I come from a country where the sun goes down at 6 and the sun comes up at 6, where, yeah, during the summer months, you finish your last jump at like 9:30, and then you're getting home by 10:30, 11, and then finally getting to sleep, and then waking up the next morning and getting to the drop zone by 7 to go and jump. So like, sleep is a big thing, and it kind of hits you quite hard on being at your very, very, very best. When you've kind of made those adjustments within yourself, you've got to also then, you know, the next step is looking at your discipline. You know, like, what are you doing for the day? You know, there's no use of, you know, strapping a pocket rocket to you and go doing a record attempt, you know, like with 100 people in the sky and you're jumping a high wing-loaded canopy and putting yourself into a massive amount of danger zone. So looking at what you're going to be doing for the next day is highly, highly important to survival. You know, when I'm planning my things, I look at like, am I doing work jumps? Am I doing fun jumps? And then my gear comes into it, because, you know, depending on my discipline is how I'm going to set up my gear. You know, if I'm going to go do fun jumps and do hop and pops, cool. I'm going to, you know, take my slider off, put my RDS system on and go jump it, because, you know, I'm dedicating myself to those jumps. If I'm working like I usually am, and I'm, you know, doing a PFF level or a coach jump or a camera jump, you know, even though I'm jumping a highly wing-loaded canopy, I'll set it up normal, because I want the extra time, the extra ability to make decisions and not have the variables in my equation. So, you know, you look at what you're doing and kind of gear yourself up for what kind of discipline you are actually doing. Also, I don't know about you guys. Like I said, I'm a full-time skydiver, so I have 2 sets of gear. So I know that, you know, if I'm doing a PFF level with bigger people and I need to wear weights, you know, I make sure that I can take my bigger canopy, even though it's only 10 square feet bigger, I take it instead. And with that, I know that my reserve is bigger. And that's a big one that most canopy pilots that are working skydivers forget about, is the fact of when, you know, things go wrong, you know, and you're wearing lead and things like that, you want to have that bigger reserve. So taking your gear into account is a very, very, very big thing to think about. When it comes to gear maintenance, you know, when you actually packing your gear and you're taking the time to look at your stuff, is to kind of look at it, because you know, when we are doing high volume amount of jumps, and some of the people on this forum, you know, you guys are working skydivers or you do a good amount of jumps, you have to realize that the canopies that we are flying, you know, don't get a lot of jumps out of a line set. You know, for myself, I do around about 450 jumps on my personal rigs per season. So that's like 2 line sets for me per season that I need to do. And like, I have a cutoff number where like I do 200 jumps on a line set, and I don't try and push my luck further than that. Some people have the attitude of, I'll jump my lines until they snap. And I don't know if you've had a malfunction where you have your line snap on your pro rig. I mean, those mals are hectically fun and they spin you up and you have a good reserve ride. And I mean, that's best case scenario. When you look at the worst case scenario on old lines and jumping them is snapping them on your turn. And I don't know a lot of people that have had a snap line on your rotation on your turn. I know one person, and that person barely survived. A highly wing-loaded person doing a big turn, snapped one of his lines on his turn and hit the ground hard and was out for a very, very, very long time. And I don't feel that that is a risk that's worth taking. So good gear maintenance is always a good thing, you know, rather prevent things from happening before they happen. When you've taken your gear into everything, I always look at other things like my conditions. And when I look at conditions, I'm not looking at just weather conditions. I'm looking at the drop zone conditions. You know, if it's a drop zone that you know or you don't know, walking out, seeing what the conditions of the landing area, the environment, you know, the weather that is coming over it, the wind conditions. Are you at a drop zone that has high turbulence? When it comes to the landing area, are the conditions conducive to doing big turns? Do you have lots of outs that you can take? Taking the couple of minutes, I mean, with being skydivers, I mean, we all many weathermen as we are with all our weather apps and making sure that we know what the weather is doing, is checking our weather conditions of the uppers and lower winds. You know, it's a very, very important thing as a canopy pilot to know what you're dealing with. And again, something that I've kind of realized here in Canada, which I've never realized at any other country I've jumped at, is the amount of different layers of winds that Canada has. I mean, especially in Ontario, I mean, we can have like 3 or 4 different directions of wind on any given day. So knowing the fact of what your winds are doing will literally give you the knowledge of where your entry points are going to be, you know, where you're going to have your circuit pattern, how you're going to set your canopy up, you know, your orientation, all of those kind of things works on your conditions. So always take the time to see that and understand what your conditions are doing. It takes 5 minutes of your time to walk outside and check it. It is definitely something that is needed to be done. Once you're basically at the drop zone, getting yourself done, you know, planning your jump is one of the important things of actually, you know, doing for your skydive. I mean, either you're prepping a PFF student or a coach, or you're prepping yourself on your own kind of jump if you're going to go do a canopy piloting jump. And it is extremely important to visualize. I mean, you see the 4-way guys and the free fly guys, you know, as soon as they know what they're doing, they do a couple of visualizations. Canopy pilots should actually do the same kind of thing. And the main thing for that is to plan A, plan B, visualize what you're going to do on different situations, because conditions and your jump can change from just the standard of getting out of the plane on a fast spot, and you have to change your plan. So rather have multiple plans on your landing so you don't get caught out. So visualization and setup is extremely important. And when you're visualizing, I use the most important thing I use for my turns, which I don't want to say prevents me ever turning low, but it gives me my checklist. Because like I said before, you know, canopy piloting doesn't have set rules. And for myself, I've made my own set rules. And I've taken it from people that I've learned from on forums and things like that, where I ask myself these questions when I'm visualizing the whole thing of, you know, altitude, my position, my orientation, you know, my aerial airspace, my landing area. I kind of visualize that whole thing, and I put a couple scenarios together in my head before I actually get to boarding point to say, this is what I'm going to do in these situations. When you get to boarding area and you're talking the shit with everybody there, you know, it's to also analyze and know who's on your load, what's on your load. who's in front of you, who's behind you. Because when you get there, and most of us are from turbine drop zones, you've got multiple people. You've got like, 12 to 16 people at least that are going to be on that load with you. And it's not all going to be, tandem. They're going to be fun jumpers. You're going to have a whole bunch of free flyers going out ahead of you on canopies almost the same size as you. So to discuss not only exit order, is to also discuss landing order. Now, notably, landing order is going to change because you're going to have conditions change. People might pull a little lower or something happens. But to get an awareness of who's in front of you, who's behind you, what canopy they're jumping, to kind of have that discussion with each other, that you're not going to do the seagull thing and just run for the drop zone with the mine as you're going for it, but actually have the plan of setting up a proper horizontal and vertical separation on landing to make sure that you're avoiding each other and giving each other space to be able to have a good and safe and a fun landing. When we crowd each other, we're just making it hard and unenjoyable for everyone. And we make things into a little bit more of not a panic situation, but a more high stress situation. So rather by opening it up, it takes the stress away that you can actually think and make decisions without actually being compromised. Once you get to your skydive part and you've done your skydive and you open your parachute, that's when things really, really start happening. And we get to our housekeeping, let's say that much. And somebody actually put this article out on Skydive Mag, which I liked, and I've actually kind of, adopted it because I think it's quite good, is when you're doing your housekeeping, you've got to realize when you're on these small parachutes, you're flying them as soon as they open. And when you're doing this, you're already directing and trying to get to your setup point. I know for myself, when I'm open, I've got a minute, literally a minute to get to my setup point and do my turn. My time is very, very crucial. So when I'm stowing my slider, my chest strap, getting my harness adjust, taking in a breath because you might have been on a hectic PFF jump or a very, very fast-paced free-flying jump and you're exhausted, is to kind of set your mind and everything to ease and actually get yourself focused and clear. Think actively of controlling your canopy, getting it to the spot. Is the wind in my favor? Am I in a fast spot? Am I getting back in time? Am I actually going to get back? And the main thing is when you open, you're going forward, and especially being a canopy pilot, you are generally the senior jumper in the group. And because you're flying such a small parachute, you need to know that everybody else on a bigger parachute theoretically has right of way, because you need to give them that, because you're the most dangerous in the sky, because we're going the fastest. We need to be the most aware. We need to know what we're doing. So that whole thing of vertical and horizontal separation is very crucial. I know for myself is like, as soon as I open my parachute, I'm counting canopies to find out where everybody is. Because as soon as I know where everybody is, I know how to set myself up. And that's very, very crucial, that you don't land up getting into somebody else's airspace or possibly landing up having a canopy collision. Because that's something that we're not even getting to the point of, is canopy collisions. And it's a big one with our canopies. So, maintaining that vertical and horizontal separation is a very crucial thing for all of us to do, and for all of us to start teaching students and novices how to do. It's one thing I've noticed here since I got to Canada and started to actually train and teach people in Ontario is it's something that's been lost, with jumpers, because it's not discussed. And I feel that it needs to be brought back. Now, and at this point, we can kind of make our decisions. Are we going to make it to our point? Do we need to make adjustments on our floats and everything like that? Then we're going to get to the most important part of the entire thing, and that is setup. So when I do my canopy coaching, it's the one thing that I do hammer into everybody's head, is if your setup is bad, your landing is going to be bad. That is where everything takes place. That's where the main decisions of high performance landings come from. So as you can see on the screen over there, the 5 checklists that I have always jumped and I try and teach people with on the altitude. And the main thing with that is are you at the correct altitude for your planned turn? Now, for me, I always plan my main turn, my secondary turn, and my third turn. So I know that, if I can't get to my setup point at the altitude that I want to do my main turn, I still have other turns in my disposal that I can do. It is the nice thing about being able to do bigger turns. Position. Are you getting to the position of where you want to actually enter, where you want to be on your turn? Because your entry point is like your gates. If you've done any, like let's say, competition swooping, you'll be flying through gates. And you want to kind of set up where you want to level off, because wherever you're going to level off, you can determine where you're going to end. So you know the distance that you want to get to, and if it's clear. Orientation. Are you actually coming from the right direction that you feel comfortable? Now, all of us have our predominant side of how we like to do our turns. If we like to do left-hand turns or right-hand rotations. And that's a big one, because sometimes if you get out the plane, you might be on the wrong side for your orientation. Also, depending at the drop zone that you're at, you might have to change your orientation depending on your outs. You know, like you coming into a drop zone and your orientation is you love to do a 270 to the left. But if you do a 270 or left-hand 270, you might have obstacles, you know, the 180 degrees behind you that you have no outs. So if you find out that you're low and you want to abort your landing, you have no outs. So you have to look at your orientation to know that while you like that turn, you might need to change it to make sure that you have the correct out if you are low, to make sure that you're safe. Airspace. Aerial space is also excessively important, because you have jumping with other people. To know that your airspace is clear in front, below, and beside you is important. And the biggest thing with this one that is nice is most of us on our method on how we do our high performance turn is most of us come in on our brakes and we do what we class as the bump. You know, you push the canopy up into a stop so that you can create a dive. At that point, when you're slowing everything down, is to look around you, take that last look in front and aside and behind you to see if your airspace to do your turn is clear. Once you've done that, is to look at your landing area. Make sure that your landing area is clear for you to land in that area, that there is nothing else that's going to be in that landing area or people going the other way in that landing area. If you can check off a tick on all of those, you know that you are good on your setup and you're good for your turn. If one of those is not checked, then you need to start asking yourself the quick question, is it good for me to actually do this turn? And the problem with us is we have this little devil that sits on our shoulder and talks into our ear to say, you know what, you did it the last time, you can get away with it, you can do it again. And the problem is yes, that might be true for a bit, but it's not going to hold up. Sometimes and soon it will catch up to you and you'll find yourself in a situation that you'll have a close call. Hopefully just a close call. So as soon as you assume something, know the fact that maybe you should abort. You know, I like the saying, you know, assumption is the mother of all F-ups. And it's very, very true. As soon as you assume something, know the fact that maybe you shouldn't be doing it. This whole thing is extremely highly important. Now, when we get to, you know, the high performance turn, where let's just face it, it's the hook turn. You know what I mean? We all have different versions of our turn. Some of us do 630, some of us do 450, some of us do 270s. Some drop zones, like I say, only let you do 90s. You know, whatever you're doing on a high performance parachute and you are doing what is classed as a high performance turn, which in a way, let's just dumb it down. It's literally putting your canopy into a dive, which reduces your altitude, which increases your rate of speed. Now, the purpose of that whole thing is for us to now get a high rate of speed, which creates more lift so that we can go, you know, fast and far, low down to the ground. All of this is, you know, the different methods of doing it. You know, we all know it. It's harness turns, front rises, rear rises. You know, techniques are changing every day. Canopies are very, very different. You know, you've got so many different brands and different platforms. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing you've got to look at when you're saying you're doing a high performance turn, it's not classed as a low turn. Even if you're thinking that a 90 is a low turn, a high performance turn is a high turn with a high recovery arc. If you play by those rules, then you are possibly going to save yourself and be able to swoop for a long time. The style of your turn, your style and your turn dynamic. I mean, like, we can sit here for hours and talk about different turns and different, dynamics and things like that. And it's very personalized. Every single person that does high performance landing has their own kind of method. And the biggest thing with this that I want to say is it doesn't matter what your experience level is. It doesn't matter if you've been doing it for years and you feel like you're competent. Never stop learning. So never stop getting coaching, never stop practicing, never stop reading forums and taking advice from other people. There are so many techniques coming out at any given time. I mean, the last 16 years for me has been, massive development from, the old VX canopies to the new layers and Petras. I mean, flying styles have changed astronomically on being able to make those parachutes fly. If you're trying to get into it, if you're starting to become a swooper and you're wanting to learn, again, like I said before, get coaching. If you can't get a coach and you don't have coaches near you, find a mentor. Mentors are very, very important. And it's something that I think you learn actually more from if you can find somebody at your drop zone that you feel comfortable with to mentor you, that is ahead of you. Remember that, mentors are somebody that you want to inspire you. You want them to be able to help you push your limits within your limits and not to their limits, like what sometimes coaches do, where they push you way out of your comfort zone. You want to find somebody that's going to push you to your ultimate level comfortably, safely. They also to know that the fact that, how it's kind of a difficult, mentors aren't always the best swoopers. They're not like your champion swoopers or anything like that, and vice versa. But they are the ones that are going to keep you grounded and keep you alive and actually make you want to be a better swooper, a better skydiver, safer. When you're at your drop zone and you want to actually learn, and you've learned as much as you can from the people at the drop zone, and you need to get other coaching, speak to your DZ, see if they're willing to actually get more coaches. Flight One do their bigger courses. You've got a whole bunch of people running around. If they can't do that, go to other drop zones, get more coaching. Coaching is never a bad thing, and educating yourself is the biggest thing. Keep on learning. Never stop learning. The biggest thing about being a swooper as well on this side is be humble. Don't get the sky god complex, and when you land and you've done something bad and you have a 200 jump wonder come to you and kind of say, don't you need to think about that, and don't give him hell. Take the advice where it comes from and be humble on what we do. The saying is always keep one foot on the brake pedal, because without releasing it, you're going to go too big too fast, and that's your biggest thing, is know when to actually hit the brakes and slow yourself down. Going too fast too quick can become your downfall at the end of the day, because you go ahead of the canopy too far. There's a saying that I really, really like here, so just kind of bear with me. So what you always want to do when you're swooping is imagine that you're in you're in this bubble or a balloon, and the air inside is your skill, your experience, your awareness, your reactiveness, your currency. The bubble grows as you continue to develop as an athlete. When everything operates within that bubble, you can deal with it. This is a good thing, but it can also lead to complacency, and complacency is a problem. When we get complacent and we make decisions on the whim, and you think, oh hell, I've done it before, I can get away with it again. Don't. Always be on your toe. Always be prepared for anything. Now, to finish this up, and like I say, I've done this kind of very vague, and I've kind of gone into, let's say, the lead up to advanced flying. But I want to leave you guys, before we go into the discussion part of it, that, as canopy pilots, we are very testosterone driven and ego driven, and we like to push. We like to push the limits. And one thing we have to realize that sometimes those limits push back. And as long as we can keep ourselves, humble and ready to learn, hopefully we can all come through this. And the biggest thing that I know with all these safety seminars that we're trying to do is bring awareness that we talk about these things and try and find ways to come up with answers to make our discipline safer. Because the last thing that we want to try and do is leave it up to the governing bodies and the drop zones to make these decisions for us, because we're not going to like them. And the last thing we want to do is, have things go to so restrictive that it kills the sport. I was prepping for this whole seminar. I was doing a little bit of research and listening to the BPA's thing, because they had the same kind of thing of going through their fatality list and how do we make this thing better? How do we make canopy piloting safer? And they were looking at different models that other countries have been doing. And the one that they brought up was the French. The French have a very, very rigid and strict progression system, where they won't even allow people to jump onto cross-brace canopies until they have 2,000 skydives. And you have to literally register everything online on what you're doing and actually ask permission to jump things. And I find that, no one wants to go that way, to that restrictiveness. But the problem is when they look into it, is like they want to say it's not going to work and it's killing the sport. But when they actually go into the background to see, is it actually making a difference on the safety wise? And it is. And that is the problem, is being restrictive for those countries have actually made it safer. So how do we make canopy piloting and make us as canopy pilots safer without having those restrictions? Knowing the fact that all the fatalities that are actually happening in our discipline is all related to canopy pilot error. So we have to look into ourselves on how do we make it safer. Now, I might get shot for this next comment because, it's controversial and some people are all for it and not for it. But in the US, they've had this whole gun control thing where, they want to ban guns because they say, guns are killing people. And I kind of disagree with that. I don't believe guns kill people. I believe people kill people. They use the gun to do it. That's their tool to kill people. And, people are all saying that, hook turns are killing people and are hurting people and things like that. But at the end of the day, the hook turn is just our tool. That's what we use to do our discipline. It's us, the human little factor, the little meatball that's underneath the fabric that is actually making the mistakes that are actually ending up with this. So if we can kind of ask the right questions and look into ourselves and educate our friends to be able to make the right decisions, maybe we can make this safer without actually having those restrictions. So now what I actually just want to do, I'm kind of done talking, and I think you guys are sick and tired of hearing my voice babble on. I'm going to now kind of leave it up. If you guys want to ask me a couple of questions, go for it. My main goal is to give it to you guys to actually bring up some points and let's have a little bit of a discussion, because that's how we're all going to learn. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. So we are going to move into the discussion aspect of this. And for those of you who weren't, hopefully, can everyone hear me clearly? We're all good. Nicholas, you need to give me the thumbs up.
There we go. I'm good.
Awesome. So just so you guys are aware, there is an icon and there's a reactions tab when you look at the bottom of your Zoom, and there should be a little hands up icon. So I'll just do mine here where I can raise my hand. See, I raised my hand. Yay. And then when, of course, it kind of goes in order for me. And when I have answered your question, you'll see where it says raise your hand. We can lower your hand. Perfect. I did have a question, Nicholas, that did come up for chat. Sorry, I'm just getting some feedback here. So someone was curious and mind me, my knowledge isn't great, what size lines you use. So for example, 300, 400. So if you don't mind adding more about that.
So basically, I keep with the manufacturer spec. So like for myself, I jump NZ Aerosports canopies. I jump a layer. So I keep it to the 400 Vectran lines. On request, they can make, thicker lines for you. I personally just like them because I know them, and it's kind of my preference to have it. So even though they only have, let's say, between 100 to 200 jump lifespan, it's like my variable I'm willing to take inside of it.
Excellent, thank you. Hopefully that answered the question. And so the floor is open for discussion. Anyone want to start this off? Just raise your hand, or you can type in the chat, say, hey me, pick me.
Everybody's quiet.
Everyone's quiet. I do have to unmute you, so you can't just talk. So just either raise your hand or, oh, I do have a question from Matt. Matt, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and go ahead, Matt.
I unmuted myself. So, Nick, first thing, I take extreme offense to that gun control comment. I am extremely upset. Okay. Given that we're off a little bit longer this off season, can you kind of speak to a kind of like maybe, I don't know, I'm going to put some random numbers to it. You can adjust them, obviously. But can you speak to like a 5, 10, 15 jump plan that you would recommend for kind of getting back into it? What's the appropriate steps in that regard?
It kind of depends on what you're flying, Matt. I mean, it's to do a 10 or a 15 jump plan, it's all going to depend on like time of what you're jumping. Again, if you're jumping, again, I mean, I'm just taking you in account because I know you're jumping, it's still a 135 at the moment, right?
Yeah, until the 109 comes in.
Until the 109. So, the biggest thing that you want to try and do is getting back in is doing as much, like, you have to go do your EP skills and all of that stuff that we all lovely have to do. But again, when you get to your canopy side, is to get some canopy time and take it easy. Not to just go and huck the first jump you do and go do a deep 90 or a big turn or something like that on it, because you got to remember that because you've been off for so long, you have a lot of variables that have changed. So you got to like take in, again, all your weight conditions. Has things changed in yourself? Get your reaction times back up, because flying a canopy is not like riding a bike. You can't just spend 6 months off and think that you can climb back on it and everything is going to be exactly the same. So taking that slow by holding back and doing a little bit of drills for yourself, figuring out like, does everything still feel the same? Are your turns upstairs, like if you go do a hop and pop from 5,000 feet and go and actually feel what your canopy is still doing, and do you still have it? Giving yourself the altitude rather higher than lower when you get back. So every turn that you do and you're coming in your approach, rather, instead of being on the wire, add an extra 50 feet to your turn. Very big to take that extra 1, 2, 3, 4 jumps just to get yourself back into the routine, get yourself that currency going for the day or the weekend or whatever it is. But it also depends on your level. I mean, it's like if you're a person that has 3, 4, 500 skydives, these are things that I want to kind of say are common sense. You know what I mean? It's like you're not going to go and like you haven't been behind a car in a while. You're not going to just like climb behind and hit the pedal and go 220 k's an hour straight off the bat. You want to feel it as it goes and build yourself up. We always talk about the fact of when you're flying high performance parachute, because you're flying so fast, you never want to be behind the canopy. You want to be in front of the canopy. You don't want it to fly you. You want to fly it. And you need to make sure you're at that level. So you need to kind of see where your own personal reaction times are at that precise moment, and kind of grow back into it. Get yourself back into the right speeds for actually flying your parachute.
Thanks.
Excellent, Matt. You muted yourself. It's lovely. Anyone else have any questions, conversation starters, feedback? I'm going to really quickly, there's one thing that I would just like to read to everybody. And Nicholas, I'm just going to mute you because I think I'm getting feedback from you. There we go. Yay. So just a really quick, I am part of the Technical and Safety Committee here on the CSPA. And so we do look at AIM reports and whatnot. And I spent quite extensive time looking at the International Skydiving Commission, their safety survey from 2019. They print them actually a year late, but so according to the 2019 International Skydiving Commission, the ICS, safety survey report, it was concluded that human error on the part of the skydiver accounted for 80% of all reported fatalities in 2019. And that's based on data supplied by 46 countries. The ISC Technical and Safety Committee also reported that this percentage was consistently high over many years. Therefore, pointed to the constant need to reinforce training and safety procedures at all levels in skydiving. It is important to recognize your limitations, including but not limited to currency, skill level, external inputs, and personal inputs. For those of you CSPA, review of the CSPA PIM 2B, section 6.3.1, factors affecting human performance, will assist in recognizing possible performance inhibiting factors. Additionally, jumpers should regularly review the CSPA Sport Canopy endorsement document to ensure a safe transition during training and to assist in their overall skills development and awareness. Exercising caution, common sense, self-discipline, control, alertness, and better judgment is highly recommended to help ensure continued safety. Never attempt anything beyond your skill level or without first consulting a certified coach experienced in that discipline. And I love, Nicholas, that you covered in on a lot of that as well. I have Mike Sear with a question. Mike, I'm going to get you to unmute.
Can you hear me all right, Nick? There we go. Okay, it looks like it's muted everyone else. Hi, Nick. Nice to meet you. Mike Sear. I jump on the island here at Gordon Ellison's DZ, as well as one other. We only have the two on the island here, so we're a relatively small group of jumpers. We don't have a turbine, so a currency. You touched on that with the plane type. I thought that was really good. But we also don't have a lot of jumpers that swoop on the island. I think a good safe swooper, you need to be very current at it. And so that often involves traveling. It often involves getting coaching from high-level coaches, which again, we don't have here on the island. So there's no travel to the States right now. You're not going to get that coaching. Maybe back east, I don't know. I'm not familiar with a lot of the jumpers back east, but so I do a 270. I'm relatively competent at it. I don't really compete, but you mentioned this and you say a lot of the new jumpers, they'll look up to the swoopers and they see that, they want to do it. It looks cool to new jumpers. It's impressive. And I'm constantly trying to reel jumpers in and slow them down. And they want to get to that level so quickly. It's a real struggle. Like, what do you have for advice on slowing new jumpers down and just saying, listen, there's not a bare minimum here. Just take it slow, enjoy the ride. Like, what do you stress to them? What do you say?
It is a very, very big problem because again, it's people idolize it. I mean, like when they see you coming in, they get that butterfly feeling, they hear the canopies fly past and they all want to kind of do it. And they have this little desire in them that they can just, that they can do, 50 to 100 skydives and they can be doing what we're doing. The biggest thing again is giving them guidelines, giving them a little bit of a game plan to work at, as a relatively, let's say, senior jumper, and if you are like one of the swoopers at the drop zone, is to kind of give them a rundown of what they need to do to be able to get there. Everybody needs a goal to actually work towards, and as long as they know the goal and like they say the method to get to that goal, then they work within that task. So if they want to get to the point of jumping high performance, it's like to talk to them to say, okay, so you need to first get through all your kind of your let's say get your right kind of licenses, get your endorsements done. Then it's to look at, let's say, the basic side. So like, I know we used to run like not the beginner swoop side, but it was beginner swoop, where, you know, people were on big canopies because, you know, they're jumping 170s or, you know, 150s max. And you're letting them do it in a safe environment by teaching them and educating them correctly by using their goal system to say, you need to get to X amount of jumps, and then we can take it to the next point, and then get to the next kind of level, and then kind of move them down that kind of path. With the goals, you can string it out as far as you want and not put hurdles in their way, but give them things that they need to check off. And as long as they have that and they know that up front, that's all they want to know. We have, you know, we've kind of started our own program at Skydive Toronto. And, you know, already for this season, hopefully we can go to do nationals. I know they're trying to plan a nationals out. And I already have, you know, new jumpers that are so interested in swoop. And it's like, okay, so let's get on a program. Let's get you up to speed. Let's go do hop and pops, get to know the canopy, and get your currency up that kind of way of just doing the basic things on how to actually speed up your canopy without pushing that limit too far. You know, it's the only way they're going to learn is by doing it. And as long as you give them the controlled environment with baby steps, you'll get them right. And they will learn the right kind of way. Yeah, it's a tough one, especially with newcomers, but that's the only thing I can kind of put it down to: goals, and give them tasks, get them to actually work towards it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Now, I don't consider myself a qualified canopy coach, and I wouldn't feel comfortable giving people canopy progression advice. I can give safety advice, and I can happily try to reel people in, but getting them to progress, I don't feel qualified to start discussing that advice yet.
No, that's 100%. I mean, like, get them to contact, contact me. I mean, like, my details are over there, and if they can travel out this way, they can always come and, do a course with me, and we can kind of get them going. Again, for you, you don't want to be a coach. You don't want to be, let's say, the one kind of helping them to progress because you feel you're not at that level. But again, that's where a mentorship comes up. You know what I mean? It's like what I'm looking at, like when I say a mentorship, is to be able to give them the basic background to kind of get them to progress the right way. It's give them the building blocks that's, at the end of the day, it's something that we don't have to break when they have 500 or 600 jumps that they've already bled in. So, the simple things of discussing, not making them do, but discuss a proper pattern, where the play zone is, how to set up into your circuit pattern and then into your landing pattern. Those are all basic things that, like us as coach ones, coach twos, have to discuss. Even if you want to try and do, get them to do the endorsement, the canopy endorsement. Those are the kind of things that they need to start doing. Discuss things with them. Might not need to teach them, but talk to them, make forums, show them where the forums are to people you trust. I mean, I'm not overly a huge fan of Brian Germain. I mean, he's a great guy. The amount of knowledge that man has is insane. And for those kind of people is let them read his book, let them watch his blogs and take advice from him. In these COVID ages, it's the only thing that we can do while people can't travel. I mean, as soon as people can travel, it's like we can get coaches. And I mean, even for myself, I would love to get down to Vancouver and do some canopy courses that side, and just kind of work with people. And for yourself, again, like I say, is maybe look at trying to maybe just be more of a mentor than a coach.
Yeah, thanks. I like that advice you threw out as a mentor.
Perfect.
Nice haircut, Mike. Can't call you a hippie anymore. All right. Anyone else? We've got some questions, discussion.
Well, the one thing that I'll bring up, I mean, it's a big topic, especially coming from, let's say, people coming up in the ranks, and let's say starting to get into the progression side of downsizing and things like that. And it's one thing that keeps on getting forgotten because there's no massive structure. The CSPA has got recommendations. They put down the recommendation of Brian Germain's downsizing chart, which, I mean, he did a phenomenal job when he did make it. And we kind of forget the fact that downsizing chart was made, in the early 2000s, when, swooping was coming up in the ranks. But we all forget the fact that with technology on canopies going so far and so quick, wing loading is one aspect. And the other biggest aspect that I take in more than wing loading is platform. Platform of canopy is huge. And, when people are trying to downsize canopies and get into, let's say, doing high performance, it's becoming a thing now of, what canopy to jump, from the different brands. So like going from a Sabre 3 to, a Crossfire 3 to all of these different platforms. So when people are actually looking at swooping, look at platforms. If you are an experienced skydiver and you have 2 rigs, try and keep your platforms the same. For myself, I know that I've got 2 layers. I've got a 66 and a 78, but I don't mind the size difference because I need the size difference, but the platform is very, very important because my flying style and my technique, I'm now adapted to fly that platform of canopy. And to have different platforms, like having a layer and possibly a velo or a Valk or one of those canopies that fly not completely different, but they are different canopies because your initiation altitudes are different. And the way it dives, the way it flies is different. Is if you're going to be jumping multiple gear and you have 2 gear, try and make sure that your gear is the same platform, because that can get you into trouble, especially when you're jumping at drop zones with turbines. And let's just say you are on a busy day where you're doing 10 skydives a day, and you kind of, it's hard to forget, but you kind of get into that groove where you're getting tired, you're getting complacent, and you don't really remember what canopy you're jumping. You don't want to be in that situation where you're jumping. For instance, you've got yourself a 66 layer in one rig and you've got a Crossfire 2 in the other rig, where you have one canopy that you've got to turn at to do a 270, you got to turn it at 800 feet, and the other one, you're going to do it at 600 feet. You don't want to get that mixed up and do it the other way around because you're tired and complacent. So always try and keep to the same platform all the time. And the only reason why I say this is because I used to do it. Back for a while, I used to jump different platforms at any given moment, and I found myself getting into the corner quite often. So that's a little bit of advice that I give across on my opinion. And I see we got a hand up.
We do. I'm just going to unmute you there, James.
You actually answered the question that I was going to ask there a little more about getting into the corner and all that, because, for instance, with swooping, we have stuff that, for instance, swoop ponds for that to make it a little safer for us. But yeah, you already spoke about that after I put up the hand, so.
No worries. And that is the thing. I mean, swoop ponds are a very big thing. I mean, again, if you want to learn how to skydive, like how to swoop, the best place is to go do it over a pond. Now, ponds are a very difficult thing here in Canada. I don't think there's very many of them around. I mean, how many do we have? Do we have 2 or 3 in Canada? I actually don't know, but there's not a lot of them. And it's a sad factor because it does give you a bit of a safety net. Now, I mean, I know personally, I mean, in my career, I've only injured myself once, and that was actually over a swoop pond. But it would have been a lot worse if it wasn't on a swoop pond. So, for people who want to try new things and try new turns and try new techniques or go do a bit of freestyle, I know a lot of people do a lot of freestyle over grass, but I've also seen a lot of people doing that land up hurting themselves. So try and actually bring yourself to actually learn how to do it over a pond. It's a good thing. If you can travel towards a pond and go practice things, it is definitely the way to go.
Excellent. Any other questions or any other hands, side questions? No, we're good. Nicholas, anything you need to add or would like to add?
Look, I mean, like if, again, you know, if anybody gets any kind of questions or wants to bring up a discussion after this, if they kind of like, oh, I wanted to ask that or whatever, I do welcome you can get hold of me anytime. I'll answer any kind of questions that you kind of bring up, and I can kind of guide whatever I can. Again, most of the things I do say is from my own experience. So I don't kind of say that what I say is gospel. Don't take me wrong. I'm not the best swooper out there. I'm not the most well-known swooper. I have been around long enough to see some fantastic things of records being broken, and some of the idols that we all idolize do some phenomenal things. And I've also seen a lot of bad things. So, you know, a nice kind of mixture of being able to give a little bit of a impartial kind of a view. So again, anybody that wants to know anything, give me a you can always get hold of me.
Excellent. I'm just going to mute you for a second, Nicholas. Well, I definitely cannot thank all of you guys enough. I know we had people not only from Canada, but the US, and I actually had a couple people from outside of that. We do have, like I said, Skydive Vancouver Island is holding a safety seminar series, which is not over yet. But next week we have 2 more, and that's the end of it. So on Tuesday, April the 27th, again at 6 p.m. on Zoom, we have a wingsuit safety seminar. And the reasoning for that is just in Canadian statistics that we looked at from AIM reports last year. Just over 11% of AIM reports were actually wingsuit flights, and that was just in what descriptions were recorded. So wingsuit safety seminar, 6 p.m., Tuesday, April 27th. And on Thursday, getting out of the pattern of Tuesdays here, but on Thursday, April 29th, oh, and pardon me, the wingsuit is going to be presented by Scott Callentine, who is from the US. He is, I think, fairly well known within the wingsuiting community. He is also on the International Skydiving Committee. He sits on the wingsuit committee for them. And so he's very excited to present. And then on Thursday, April 29th, we have a rigger safety seminar for riggers. It is not Canadian specific, just so you know. So it's not just for CSPA members, but riggers. The CSPA Technical and Safety Committee Chair, Bill Petney, is the one that will be presenting on that. It too will be at 6 p.m. And they're going to run very similar to the way we ran this one tonight. On that note, Nicholas, I cannot thank you enough. And obviously, I need to do a big shout out to Nicholas's wife, Kelly, who is happily working Zoom in the background for him for the presentation. So yeah, and again, all of you guys, I hope that everyone finally gets skydiving. We have started here in BC, although restrictions come and go, but I do hope that one day you can come to the island, or we can be traveling to visit you. I will be, hopefully this recording looked like it worked. I will send out and share the recording of this, hopefully within the next day or 2. And I'll be sharing links and stuff like that for the other safety seminars coming up. On that note, I have nothing else to add. Nicholas, anything for you? All right. Well, thank you again very much, everybody. Yeah, be safe, have fun, get your asses to a DZ as soon as you can. And that's all I got. I will unmute everybody. So allow part. There you go. Everyone can unmute yourself to say bye or hello or
bye.
Thanks again, you guys.